Hello, everybody. I think that we are live for another episode. Oh, is it going to be a big episode? Another episode of the Visto Show. It is Friday, January the 26th, 2024. This week might go down as the week that they will never forget in the international student space in Canada. How's everybody doing? Happy Friday. Hope your week is going well. My name is Josh Schachnow, Canadian immigration lawyer, CEO here at Visto.ai. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. If you are tuning in live on LinkedIn, thank you very much for joining. Feel free to drop a hello in the chat. Can you see me okay? Can you hear me okay? Where are you tuning in from? Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Now, sometimes LinkedIn could be super buggy. The LinkedIn Live comments are so buggy. If there's anybody listening from LinkedIn Live, half the time the comments don't show up on my live feed, so I have to keep refreshing. So you're going to see me looking off to the left. Anyways, I'll do as best as I can, as I always do. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a monumental episode here today. As you can see on the screen, a big agenda of big items to go through. Number one is, of course, the new cap on study permits that was issued this week by Immigration Canada. Minister Miller comes out swinging, and I got to admit, I kind of like it. I'm going to go into the details, my opinions, my thoughts, all that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about other changes to the international student program, right? There's been changes affecting post-grad work permits, spousal open work permits, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to review that as well. And then I'm going to talk about express entry. Lost in all of this noise, there was an express entry draw this week, and to be honest, it was quite underwhelming. I want to talk about that and what we're thinking about in terms of express entry, what we're seeing, what we're thinking, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a big episode. Once again, thank you very much. Amatobi says that he's on. Thanks, Amatobi, for tuning in. I appreciate that. By all means, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts on any of the topics as I go into them, feel free. That's why you tune in live, right? Obviously to get this great content. But you can also find it on YouTube. You might be watching this after the fact on YouTube. But if you're here live, might as well make your voice heard, right? If you have any thoughts, if you have any opinions as I go through some of these topics, please feel free to chime in as well. Without further ado, that's one of my favorite words, ado, I'm probably mispronouncing it. Let's jump in to the first topic of the day, the biggest one, the detail that we all knew. Well, we didn't know, before Monday, but we all knew that this would be probably topic number one I'd be talking about. Canada, in their own words, Sheeran says, hello, Josh. Hey, Sheeran, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. Canada to stabilize. Interesting use of the word drastically cut by 35%. I mean, Canada to stabilize growth and decrease number of new international students issued to approximately 360,000 for 2024. Now, I just want to give people perspective. In the last 8-9 years, the number of international students that have been approved to come to Canada each year has exploded. Around 2015, just to give you an example, around 2015, I think the number was in the range of like 150, 200K students a year. Last year, 2023, it was in the range of like 500,000 to 600,000 international students that got approved that year, right? So that also doesn't count the international students that are already in Canada that got approvals in previous years. Right. Now, I'm not going to read every word of this. That's why I link to it in the description, right? So that you can follow along and or after the fact, if you'd like, you can read in full detail. As you know, I like to go to the good stuff and I like to highlight what I think is the most important, especially because we're on a time limit here. Runali says, hi, Josh. Hey, Runali, thanks very much for tuning in. Would love to get some of your opinions on this as I go through it. But most importantly here, IRCC has decided to cap the number of study permits they'll approve in 2024 to 360,000, a decrease of about 35% from 2023. In the spirit of fairness, individual, provincial, and territorial caps have been established, weighted by population. So what does this mean, right? Typically, I think now about 50%-ish of students go to Ontario, but IRCC's cap is going to be established weighted by population, which means that because Ontario doesn't make up 50% of the population in Canada, they're not going to get 50% of the study permit approvals, which means provinces like Ontario that have a higher proportion of students coming to them now will be hit the hardest by this cap, right? In fact, some provinces won't even be negatively affected at all by this cap because the proportion of students that go to their provinces is so low that if IRCC weights this by population as they've promised, the cap won't even be lower than the amount that they approved last year. So just to put things into perspective. Study permit renewals will not be impacted. Those pursuing master's and doctoral degrees and elementary and secondary education are not included in the cap. Current study permit holders will not be affected, right? So what's not included in the cap are if you're studying a master's, a doctoral degree, right? Something like a PhD, and elementary and secondary education, right? So, I don't know. What's that mean? Grades K through 12, I guess. IRCC will allocate a portion of the cap to each province and territory who will then distribute the allocation among their designated learning institutions. As of January 22nd, every study permit application submitted to IRCC will also require an attestation letter from a province or territory. Provinces and territories are expected to establish a process for issuing attestation letters to students by no later than March 31st, 2024. The big question I had when I saw this was, were the provinces notified ahead of time? Because this is not a lot of time, right? Obviously, you and I, the average Joes and Joettes, were not, right? But are the provinces just finding out about this on January 22nd? That hey, you have 2 months to put in place a brand new system to establish and issue attestation letters. Because if so, I can only imagine what's going on in the background right now. They must be scrambling. Now, if there is anybody listening or watching who's interested, I would love to chat because, as many of you know, here at Visto, we build Canadian immigration software, right? We've been automating documents like attestation letters for years, right? So I'm super interested. If there's anybody that wants to discuss that element of it, by all means, please feel free to let me know or shoot me a DM. These temporary measures will be in place for 2 years, and the number of new study permit applications in 2025 will be reassessed at the end of the year. So we don't know what the 2025 cap will be yet. During this period, the government will continue to work with provinces and territories, DLIs, and national education stakeholders on developing a sustainable path forward for international students, including finalizing a recognized institution framework, determining long-term sustainable levels of international students, and ensuring post-secondary institutions are able to provide adequate levels of student housing. Now, before we get into the PGWP changes, right, which are mentioned below, what do you folks think about this? This was big news, right? My thinking is this. I don't know whether this is the best move, right? I don't know if there should be a cap or not. I don't know if the cap should be at 360, if it should be higher, if it should be lower. I don't know if masters and PhDs should be exempt. But what I do know is this. There has clearly been something wrong with the international student industry for years. Minister Miller came in and said, listen, schools, provinces, agents, stakeholders, you've been warned. You need to clean up your act. If you don't clean up your act, we're going to clean it up for you. And that was what? I don't know, a few months ago, 3, 4, 5 months ago. And nothing changed. And here comes Minister Miller laying down the law, January 22nd, 2024, and saying, hey, we're going to put our money where our mouths are. You guys haven't been able to figure this out? There's all this fraud, all this scamming, all these shady dealers. Here you go. Here's your cap. Figure it out, right? So again, I'm not going to go through every little detail. I think this was a good move. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? There are parts of it I don't love, but I think overall, this was a great move by IRCC to come in and say, listen, this industry has gotten out of hand in the last 8 years, and I'm going to give you a warning to clean it up. And since you haven't cleaned it up, we're just going to have to step in and force you to clean it up, right? I think it was a great move. I think something like this needed to happen. I don't think the details, the little nitty-gritty numbers matter too much. Is it a perfect solution? No. Are there maybe ways it could be made a little bit better? Sure. Did something like this need to happen? Yes, 100%. I'm glad they did it. I'm surprised that maybe the schools or the provinces maybe weren't given more preparation ahead of time for the attestation letters. Maybe they were. I don't know. I'm not a school. I don't work in the provincial education ministries. They better get to work to get those attestation letters prepped ASAP in order to not kind of push everything back. But was it shocking? Yes. Was it needed? Yes. Do I think it was a good move by IRCC? Yes. I think it was a good step in the right direction, and now let's see what happens. Let's continue on. Again, if you have any thoughts, would love to hear more opinions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think it was a good move? Do you think it was a bad move? I've had a few posts on LinkedIn this week where I shared more of my thoughts on whether I thought it was, which parts were good, which parts were bad. But anyways, I thought all this stuff needed to happen, and I'm glad that it did happen. Let's move on. In order to better align the PGWP program, we are changing the eligibility criteria. Starting September 1st, 2024, so not yet, in about 8 months from now, international students who begin a study program that is part of a curriculum licensing arrangement will no longer be eligible for PGWPs. Under curriculum licensing agreements, students physically attend a private college that has been licensed to deliver the curriculum of an associated public college. These programs have significant growth in attracting international students in recent years, though they have less oversight than public colleges, and they act as a loophole with regards to posts to PGWPs. So what does this mean in English? Basically, we have all these public schools in different programs, and what have been popping up over the years is a private college will open up, and they will strike a licensing deal with a public college and say, I'm just naming random names, right? I'm not saying whether these schools do or don't do this or not. Hey, my name's Josh. I'm going to start ABC Private College Incorporated, and I'm going to strike a licensing deal with Humber College, just as an example, and I'm going to license their curriculum, and I'm going to start running classes at ABC Institution Incorporated. And I'm going to charge huge tuition fees, because why the heck not? And I might not even have classrooms. I'm going to provide these, virtually, especially since COVID. And I'm basically going to have international students pay me tens of thousands of dollars a year to teach them a virtual curriculum that I've copied from public colleges. And I'm basically going to, print out approval letters, diplomas or whatever for them when they graduate, and then they can get PGWPs, right? So that's become a huge problem. Graduates of master's degree programs will soon be eligible to apply for a 3-year work permit. Under current criteria, the length of the postgrad work permit is based solely on the length of an individual study program, hindering master's graduates by limiting the amount of time. So what this is saying is, as it works right now, the PGWP is granted in most cases, I'll say this. If your program was less than 2 years, then you get a PGWP that matches the length of your permit, right? So let's say you come to Canada and you study a 1 year's master's program, then your PGWP will be 1 year, right? Now, what's the problem there is in Canada, it's very tough until you get 1 year of Canadian work experience to have a high enough score for something like Express Entry. So we might be bringing these extremely talented and smart and skilled master's graduates, but they don't have a long enough PGWP to actually stay and settle and get PR in Canada. So this seems like a good move in terms of, empowering those students that hopefully deserve the PGWP to have a longer PGWP so they can, settle, get the right work experience that's needed, and hopefully graduate, so to speak, or evolve into, a PR holder. So I think these are pretty good moves, in my opinion. Gabriel says the cap was definitely necessary. Do you feel that they will add a cap for open and closed work permits in the near future? Nazar says, I agree. I'm going to get to your question in just a second here, Gabriel. I'm just catching up on the comments. The LinkedIn Live is broken. I can't on my live feed. For some reason, I don't know why. They don't show up. So I have to refresh a second page that I'm watching all the comments come in. So anyways, I apologize. Gabriel says, hi. Ramandeep says, I think students age 18 to 20 have increased from the past 2 years. I agree the cap was necessary. All students, I think, Ramandeep, have increased from the past 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Nazar says, I agree. Gabriel says, do you feel that they will also add a cap for open and closed work permits in the near future? Gabriel, that's an interesting question, and I think is a little bit different, right? The reason why I think the international skilled worker programs might not be as affected. Now, open work permits and closed work permits are very different things, right? To answer your question, a closed work permit basically means you need a job offer and to be sponsored by a Canadian employer. And this, if we can ignore all of the LMIA fraud for a second, I think that's very important, right? Because I think what the government should do is put the power in the market, aka employers, make LMIAs and closed work permits easier to get, and make it easier for companies that actually need talent to sponsor that talent, right? The reason why we partially need a lot of students is because we're not bringing in enough workers, because the LMI and work permit processes and timelines are so convoluted, complicated, and long, right? So you have all these Canadian employers, they need workers. They're just not willing to go through the LMI process because it's a pain in the ass. In a perfect world, of course, international students are an important piece to this puzzle, but in a perfect world, any company that's in an industry that's facing a shortage would be able to pretty quickly and pretty easily, assuming they're a legitimate company, get an LMIA pretty quick, get a work permit pretty quick, bring in the talent that they need. Bing, bang, boom, done, right? Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, but if I could snap my fingers. Now, open work permits, a little bit different because there are open work permits for many different reasons, right? I'm going to get into this in just a second, Gabriel, but they're capping spousal open work permits, right? Actually, let me just keep reading here. Open work permits will only be available to spouses of international students in master's and doctoral programs. The spouses of international students in other levels of study, including undergrad and college, will no longer be eligible. So they're effectively capping some of the ways that you can get a spousal open work permit, especially if you're an international student and you're not in a master's or doctoral program. The important measures announced today complement other recently announced reforms to the international student. Taken together, they aim to ensure genuine students receive the support they require and the resources they need for enriching study in Canada, etc., etc. In the coming months, we will continue to work, blah, 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 clear pathways to permanent residence for students with in-demand skills. We're going to talk about PR in just a second, and explore new measures to better transition international students to the labor force. That sounds good. The department has introduced several measures. Okay, so then they go into some of the previous changes, right? So for example, they recently doubled the proof of funds requirement. DLIs are going to be required to confirm LOAs. I think these are all great changes, right? I think that in the last 2-3 months, this has probably been the most proactive, positive changes and improvements I've seen IRCC make maybe in the last 8 years. I've only been practicing for 8 years, right? And pre-COVID, things were a lot smoother, right? The world of Canadian immigration was very different pre-COVID, right? So I would say in the last 4 years, I've never seen a 2 to 3 month string of proactive, positive actions taken by IRCC to try and make things better. Now, is everyone going to be happy with these changes? Absolutely not. What a lot of people don't see within this, some people do if they're in the industry, is the international student space in Canada is largely built on commission, right? So what do I mean by that for those who don't know? A lot of international students come to Canada because they use agents, right? What are called study abroad agents who help them apply to schools and then might also help them apply for their visa, which may or may not be allowed. And in return, most of these agents make their money off of commission from the school. So if the student gets approved by the school and then they get approved for a study permit and then they come to Canada and they pay their tuition, the school will write a commission check to that study abroad agent. And so the last 10 plus years have created a huge multi-billion-dollar industry around study abroad agents sending students to countries like Canada. Now, what happens when an industry is now reduced by, maybe 30-ish%. I'm saying 30-ish% because the cap doesn't apply to master's and doctoral degrees and elementary stuff, right? So the entire industry isn't cut by 35%. Let's say 25 to 30%, right? Let's be conservative. Let's say 20%, right? 20% reduction overnight. Boom, right? Boom. 20% reduction in commission that can be earned by study abroad agents sending students to Canada in the year 2024. What does that mean? What's it going to mean for those businesses? What's it going to mean for the industry? What's it going to mean for schools, right? What's this going to mean for these private colleges that have 70, 80, 90, 95, 98% of their students are international students? 90, 95, 98% of their revenue is coming from international students. What happens? Now their school is no longer eligible for the PGWP, number one. So automatically it becomes less popular because the student's less likely to go to a school that doesn't offer a PGWP. And your cap is probably cut by about 30 to 35%, maybe more if you're in Ontario, right? You might have to cut your class by 40 to 50%. What does that do to your top line, aka your revenue? What does that do to your bottom line, aka the profit at the end of the year, right? I don't know. I don't run a school. I'm not an agent. But these are some big questions that I'm thinking about in my head because this industry just got turned upside down. This one line that I'm highlighting in this one news release on January 22nd turned the industry upside down. There's going to be huge changes. There's going to be huge people, businesses affected, and it's probably much needed. And it'll be interesting to see how this goes for the next 1 or 2 years. Runali says Josh's spouse eligible to apply for a dependent work permit if the husband is a citizen, but under 3 years of undertaking bar after previous divorce. Like a spousal open work permit? I don't think, Runali, you're saying your husband is a Canadian citizen? I don't know if you can apply for a... Don't quote me on this. I would double check it if I were you. But I don't know if you're eligible for a spousal open work permit if your spouse is a citizen. I think they have to be a PR or a student or a worker. I think. I'm not sure off the top of my head, so I would double check that. If you need specific consultations, I don't provide them anymore, but I do work closely with another lawyer who does. So if anybody does need specific paid consultation and one-on-one guidance, feel free to shoot me a message and I can send you more details about that. But anyways, as I was saying, this is crazy, right? This is another article I'll link in the chat, just in case you're curious. It kind of summarizes some of the other changes that IRCC has made to the international student program over the last 2-3 months, right? Changes for DLIs, changes on PGWP, changes on cost of living and proof of funds. There's been a lot. So I'm kind of going to wrap up that point unless anybody else has other questions or thoughts on that. But listen, I think overall it's a great change. I'm glad that they did it. 1 or 2 pieces of it are a little bit odd to me. I don't know if I would limit the spousal open work permits. I think maybe the spousal open work permits is the big one for me because we still want to attract the best and brightest students to Canada, right? And I know maybe some other countries have done this already and are doing it as well, but I don't think it's fair to punish international students for our housing crisis. It is a housing crisis. This is my opinion, right? Obviously. We have a housing crisis. I don't think we have a too many international students crisis. I think we have people can't build for cheap enough and for quick enough, and that's why they're not building, right? We live in a capitalist country in Canada. If you incentivize people enough to build, they will build, right? If you make it too expensive and too many loopholes and too long and too difficult, people won't build. That's why all these big development companies are not building faster. I bet you if you go to all these big builders, sure, they would love to build more houses and condos and whatever because they know they would probably fly off the shelves. Why are they not doing that? Probably because at the municipal and provincial level, it's way too expensive and difficult and complicated, and zoning bylaws are too difficult, and it's not worth it for them to build. Let's incentivize building. Let's not disincentivize students. Think about it this way. Let's say you're an aspiring international student and you're deciding between a few countries, and you realize that the program that you want to study in Canada means your spouse is not eligible for a spousal open work permit. And now we're making that student decide between coming to start a life in Canada and their family. And that's a really tough choice, especially if they're a skilled worker that we actually need in this country, right? What if they're an aspiring plumber, an aspiring, apprentice in the trades, in plumbing, an electrician, in construction, whatever, right? I think that the next step I would love to see, I actually think this is a great first step in the right direction. I applaud IRCC. In recent years, I have been harsh on IRCC when I didn't agree with their moves. And I will say in this case, I applaud their move. I think it was a good move. I'm happy to see it. What I would love to see next would be, how can we better align the programs that we're promoting here with the labor needs of Canada, right? So what do we need in Canada? We need healthcare workers. We need tradespeople. We need a little bit of STEM, right? Engineering, stuff like that. Maybe tech, not as much right now compared to the last few years. But we probably will again, right? So why don't we better align what programs are the most beneficial for our labor market, and let's line all of that up, right? So let's make it so that more schools can provide more programs in healthcare, in trades, in STEM. And those are the programs that are the best ones to apply to, and they lead to PGWPs, and they lead to jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I think the next step could be. Hopefully we kind of see it go in that direction. Like I said, I do think it was a good move. I don't want to belabor the point. If you have any questions or thoughts on this yourself, then please feel free to chime in. But I want to also save time to cover the next topic, which is PR. And as you know that I usually do, I will take a sip of water to segue into the next topic. Hold on a second here. Don't forget to hydrate, folks, right? Don't forget to stay hydrated. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is very much linked to everything we just talked about, which is express entry, right? So let's take a look. So far in 2024, we've had 2 express entry draws. I'm going to share this on my screen, and I'm going to copy this link in the chat if you want to follow along. This is the official IRCC express entry, website. And so far, we have had 2 draws, and I'm shocked. I don't know about you guys. I'd love to hear your opinions. I am shocked so far at what we've seen so far from express entry. And here's why. Mostly because they're just smaller than I expected, right? Runali asked, do you think IRCC will cover STEM in category-based draws in 2024? Great question. Let me answer it in just a second. So, as we can see from 2023, especially the second half of the year, IRCC was inviting anywhere from like 3,000 to 5,000 people per draw, right? And they were often doing multiple draws at the same time, right? So they would do like an all-program draw day 1, and then an industry-specific or 2 draws the day after, right? So for example, all-program draw on December 18th, and then a trades draw on the 19th, and then a transpo draw on the 20th. December 6th, big general draw, then the next day a French draw, then the next day a STEM draw, right? So they kind of got into this habit of all-program draw, followed by 1 or 2 or 3 industry-specific draws. And anywhere in the range of like 3 to 5,000 on average, right, per round. This one was obviously an exception in December because they didn't do any draws in November, if you'll remember. Now, what's happened so far in January? They did an all-program draw on the 10th, but they only invited 1,500 people to apply. So I was expecting them to do an industry-specific draw the next day, right? Maybe one or two of them. But none of them came. Then January 23rd comes around, about 2 weeks later, as per usual, and they invite 1,000 people to apply, 1,040 to be exact. Again, I was like, that's a small draw. I guess tomorrow we'll get an industry-specific draw. But none have come. So I'm very confused. I don't know about all of you. Maybe you have thoughts, maybe you have opinions, maybe you have ideas of why this might be happening. My best guess is probably one of two things. Again, these are total guesses, so take them with a grain of salt. Is number one, either they didn't want to make too much action on the PR side given all these huge changes to the international student space, right? So maybe they're like, okay, let's just do some small PR draws, right? We've got a lot of international student stuff to figure out, a lot of drama, there's going to be a lot of news. Maybe we shouldn't invite too many people to start, right? Or number two, are they making more changes to Express Entry, right? Are they rejigging it somehow? Are they, like for example, in November, they didn't do any draws because the portal was broken, right? So they had to, so are they doing something in the background, fixing something, changing something in the background? And in the meantime, they're just doing these small draws. Now, the problem here is that it was already super competitive in Express Entry coming out of 2023. This is not a good start. Look at these score requirements. First score requirement of 546 and 543. These are huge scores for those who are not aware. Basically, what this means is that unless you have something like, at the bare minimum, closed work permit, right, LMIA backed, French speaking, PNP, if you don't have any of those, you got no chance right now, right? And until they start doing industry-specific draws, this is going to look scary. So I don't try to say this to be negative. I try to say this to hopefully just educate people and say, listen, if you're planning on Express Entry in 2024, it looks like it might be a tough one. I don't know. Things could completely change. But if we look back within the last 6 months, I would say if you don't fit under any of these industry-specific draws, I would be concerned and I would start looking at PNPs right away. PNPs, pilot, programs like the AIP out east, right? Other regional or provincial programs, right? Because this could be a very tough year for Express Entry. Now, again, could something come out of left field? Are they working on something in the background to change this? I have no idea. But if you're not eligible for any of these industry-specific draws, or you're not already going through a PNP process or something like that, you better start looking in terms of if you're trying to get PR in Canada. They did hint that there's going to be some new streams and options for international students in Canada. So maybe there's another TR to PR type something, or maybe they'll go back to CEC draws. I don't know. This is just me guessing. But I would immediately start looking into PNPs and regional programs if I was thinking about permanent residence in Canada in 2024. Brunali says, due to a small mistake in the profile, I didn't get Canadian education when the last STEM draw came, but the next day I found out about it and standing at 486 and eagerly awaiting the next STEM draw. Well, let's take a quick look for Brunali. The last draw was December 8th, and the score requirement was 481. Now, the problem is, let's see, I think there was one other one. There was one STEM draw in July with a 486. So I guess, Runali, this is really going to depend on how many other people have joined the pool since then. If you're at a 486, you're probably going to be right around the fringe. Depends on the size, right? Depends on how many draws they do before then, and depends on how many people they invite. I would say, in your case, I don't even know if you're asking me for advice, but I'm going to give it anyways because, maybe it would be helpful, is I personally wouldn't leave it up to luck. So I would try to look for a, tech worker or skilled worker PNP or a regional program if possible. Just my unsolicited advice that you can feel free to ignore. If you have a long time left on your work permit or PGWP, maybe you want to wait it out for 6 or 10 months and see what happens, because there might be some new programs or big draws or CECs that might help you out, right? So if you have like 2-3 years left on your work permit, maybe sit tight, see how the next 6 months go. But if not, I would start looking around. Matthew McDonald, thank you very much for tuning in, Matthew. He says, I have a client who was invited on January 23rd with a score of 543. She didn't have an LMI or French, but she's a master's, foreign work experience, and a year of Canadian work experience and top language score. But I fully support the advice for non-EE pathways. PNP and regional programs are a must. Absolutely. So, Matt, how did no LMIA, no French, master's degree, foreign work experience in a year, and top language scores? There's got to be something else there, though, Matt. That doesn't add up to 543 in my head. They must have family members here or something. Because even with a Canadian master's and a year of work experience, you're probably still going to max out at like 480, 490. So do they have, what's the extra 50 points from? Is it from a job offer? Is it from family members, something like that? Because that on quick math, right? This is like quick Josh lawyer math in his head. Something's missing there. But hey, I don't know. It's your client, right? I don't know, right? I'm just saying off the top of my head. But anyways, yes, absolutely agree with you there. Matthew says, let me calculate. Sounds good. Josh, do you think that processing times for work permits decrease as they were too high in 2023? Gabriel, you're coming with some good questions today. I love it. Thank you very much. I don't know. I hope that they do, Gabriel. Like what I've been saying before is I think IRCC needs a year of simplification and getting back from under the backlog. And as I said, putting the power in the hands of Canadian employers. What's the biggest struggle right now? Labor shortages and housing. How do we fix that problem? We empower Canadian employers, especially those that work in trades and building houses, to hire the right people. Why are none of them using LMIs and work permits? Because, as you said, processing times are too long, right? No company wants to spend 5 months, a month of recruitment, and then 5 months recruiting and going through the LMI process, and then submitting the work permit application and waiting 2, 3, 5 months, depending on the embassy, for the work permit application, right? It's like, hey, I'm trying to build a condo. Can I bring in 25 construction workers? Sure, they'll be here in 10 and a half months, right? So if they can simplify, in my opinion, cut out all, we don't need new programs. We don't need better programs. We need a simplified, not dumbed down. We just need to refocus on the programs that we have. Study permits, PGWPs, LMIAs, work permits, express entry. Let's go back to the basics, spousal sponsorship. Let's go back to the basics. Let's focus on those. Let's get processing times down. And then, let's let the wheel kind of churn as it used to. That's my opinion. Now, will they come down? I don't know, Gabriel. This is a, shot in the dark. I hope they do. I think they will. I do think IRCC is moving in the right direction. So I hope that they do. Matthew says this person has a partner in Canada with them and partner scores complicate. Okay. So that maybe this is a case, Matthew, where it's like a partner, the partner also has a master's, the partner crushed the language exam scores too. I still think that something's missing there, even because I don't practice anymore, but back in the day I did hundreds of consultations, largely related to express entry. And usually to break 500, you need something quote unquote special, right? You need a job offer, you need French, or you need a PNP, or you need a closed work permit, or you know what I mean, or. But anyways, I could be wrong. But just in case that's maybe helpful. All right, I do want to move on because obviously we had a lot to cover today, and we've been moving pretty well. But I don't want to keep everybody here for too long. Gabriel says, I asked because I submitted mine in the last week of December, and since that it went from 25 to 17 for applications submitted from my country. 25 to 17 weeks. Yeah. Gone are the days where we would get them in 17 to 25 days, right? Gabriel, you're not going to like this, but the best advice I give to people is just try to be patient, right? It's totally out of your control. I know this is a terrible answer. It doesn't help you in any way. Maybe it helps you sleep better a little bit at night. It's totally out of your control. All you can do is wait and see. And hopefully one day, sooner rather than later, I hope, you'll get the answer that you'd like. And we can have you here in Canada for whatever that's worth, right? I wish I could be more helpful. Anyways, other than that, the last thing that I wanted to mention today is the launch of our new podcast. And this has been really fun so far. And I'm going to link to this as well. Let me share my screen, actually. So earlier this week, I launched the Canadian Immigration Pros podcast. And you might say, Josh, what the heck is that? Well, what I couldn't find, I've been looking online, I'm pretty good on social media and blah, blah, blah. But what I really couldn't find was a cool podcast where you had Canadian immigration professionals interviewing other Canadian immigration professionals and talking about the most important, exciting, latest news updates, all that kind of stuff, right? So I started it. It's called the Canadian Immigration Pros Podcast. And we have some videos up on YouTube. And then, of course, you can listen on your favorite podcast platform. I'm going to link to this in the chat if you're watching live. And if you're watching after the fact on YouTube, I will make sure to include a link to this in the description as well below. But basically, just to give you an idea, I've started having really interesting conversations with Canadian immigration professionals, right? So, for example, we have 4 episodes live already. We should have another 3 or 4 episodes within the next week or two. Talked about the international student industry in depth. So if you like what I'm talking about here, kind of evaluating the changes, I had a great episode with Abdullah Bilal. This was recorded the day the changes were announced. So we went in depth on the new cap. What were our thoughts? What does it mean for immigration? I also talked about the international student industry with Doug Ataga, right? So if you like the international student topic, I would definitely check out that episode. I had a great episode with Stephen where we talked largely about LMIA fraud, right? Another huge problem with Canadian immigration right now. So Stephen and I had a really good conversation about that, talking about what it is, how it works, how can we fix it, et cetera, et cetera. And then I had a pretty good wide-ranging conversation with Osaro about a whole bunch of things. The changes in the international student system, transitioning to PGWPs, getting PR, the good, the bad, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of other new episodes coming out soon where I cover topics like Quebec immigration, entrepreneurial programs, even starting an immigration practice is another episode that'll be coming live within a week or two. So I highly recommend, if you're interested, you can watch the episodes on YouTube, right? That link that I posted, you can just click on YouTube and you can see the playlist. Or if you prefer audio, you can find us on your favorite podcast platforms. They are right here. If you like it and you wouldn't mind subscribing, that obviously really helps. It's all free, right? Subscribing is free. Liking the videos, giving us a review on the podcast platforms is free, and it is highly appreciated. So anyways, I just wanted to highlight that. I have been posting about it a decent amount on LinkedIn, but maybe you haven't noticed, so I just wanted to flag it here. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about so far. Bruna says, hey Josh, thank you for your valuable inputs. My pleasure, Bruna. Thank you for tuning in. I'm hoping to see the draws to drop at least to 500, which is still high. Yeah. I have a feeling that if IRCC doesn't start looking at the people who dedicated themselves to being here, spent money to study here, and are working, they will start leaving Canada. Bruna, this is a great comment, and it's also kind of a great topic to end on, which is why I think Canada does need to do a careful balancing act, right? Yes, we needed something like a cap. Yes, we need to be more stringent with what's happening. We have to, draw in this industry that I think's gotten a little bit out of hand over the last few years. But my concern with something like limiting the spousal open work permits is, as you said, if we continue down this pathway of letting too many students in and not supporting them and giving them good options to become permanent residents, they're going to not be able to stay and or not want to stay, right? And it's not their fault that our system was built that way, right? So there's a whole political discussion. Is it housing? Is it too many immigrants? Blah, 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 right? I think that, yes, there are students who are not coming here for the right reasons, and they might not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. They might be working illegally, doing a whole bunch of stuff illegally, right? There are some. We know. Everybody knows, right? We've heard the horror stories. But our system is built the way it is by our government. And if we want to change it and improve it and set international students up for success, we need to make changes so that we're bringing in the right students, the right number of students, and we're setting them up to succeed by graduating, getting post-grad work permits, having clear pathways to PR, fitting into our economy and our labor market. The other big concern I have, Bruna, along the same lines, is if they come here and spend all that money and all the time studying, and then they have to go home, then what do they tell their friends and family when they come home, right? Is this going to hurt Canadian branding around the world, right? Will Canada be hit on the reputational side, right? Because being one of the top destinations for international students is great for any country, right? You can attract great talent. You can boost your economy. You can help fill jobs. It's so great for countries if you can do it well and do it properly. And my concern is if we don't do it well and do it properly, and waves of international students end up leaving and going home and telling their friends and family about their experience, it hurts brand Canada. It hurts the international student industry in Canada. And everybody in Canada is going to be sorry about it in the long run, right? In my opinion. So anyways, I appreciate the comment, Bruna. Let me know what you think if you agree, disagree. Matt says, my hope is that the cap will make it easier for temporary residents currently in Canada to transition to PR since new arrivals will be lower. Yeah, I think it's in line with that. Absolutely, Matt, which is one of the bright spots of this for if you are currently an international student or if you're on a PGWP is, as bad as this is going to sound, there will be fewer international students to compete with for PR, right? Because express entry, it's a bit of a competition, right? It's a ranking system. So the fewer people that are able to graduate in Canada, get bonus points for Canadian degrees and Canadian work experience, this might be the little break that we need so that we can focus on moving the temporary residents, over to PR. Tendo says, we went to Carleton at about the same time. Congratulations on all you're doing in the new podcast. Thank you, Tendo. Wow, that's a shout out. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words. I am indeed a Carleton Bachelor of Commerce graduate. I think you might even be able to see it. No, I think this is my law degree. I think this is my Western degree, and it's just off the camera here is my my Carleton Bachelor of Commerce degree. But thank you, Tendo. Really appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed the show and hope you're doing well as well. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there, folks. This was a really great episode. We got through a lot of content, and I really appreciate everybody who tuned in, shared their thoughts, asked their questions, all that kind of stuff. Have no doubt that this will be a very interesting 1 or 2 years at minimum in the international student space and in the Canadian immigration space. So I will continue to cover it. I will continue to host the Visto Show live on LinkedIn every 2 weeks at 12 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're following me on LinkedIn. I will continue to post the recordings on YouTube, on the Visto YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed there. In case you can't tune into the Visto Show live, you can always watch the recordings there. This one will be posted live on YouTube if you're watching this today, Friday the 26th. Usually I do get the recording up the same day, so you should see it live on our YouTube if you want to rewatch, or maybe you tuned in late and you want to catch the first half of the show. So thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Any other thoughts, comments, all that kind of stuff, please feel free to throw them my way or comment on the YouTube channel below. I will continue to post extensively on LinkedIn and record videos like this. So if you have any feedback, thoughts, comments, feel free to let me know. Thank you again. It'll be a very interesting 2024. So expect a lot more of these fun conversations. Have a great rest of your Friday if you are watching this today. Have a great weekend. And as always, I will see you in the next episode. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.